Hello, I'm Clint Griffith, and this is my Week 3 video discussion post. First, before I begin, I would like to put out a small disclaimer that if you have the hard copy physical version of the Norton Reader, I will be referring to the Kindle edition, so the page numbers may vary from the hard copy book. So if you have the hard copy, just know that the pages I reference might be different in your book. To begin, this week's discussion basically had two parts: culture analysis articles and academic research coinciding with those articles. I've decided to split those two parts up. First, I will be discussing my observations of the two articles I picked, and then I'll be discussing towards the end what I did to research further on those topics. For the assigned reading, I decided to let the title pull me in. Instead of reviewing the text first of each article a little bit and kind of getting a feel for it, I let the title completely say, yes, I'm interested, or no, I'm not interested. The two articles I picked were Tom Bissell's Extra Lives, Why Video Games Matter, and Bill McKibben's The Case for Single Child Families. The article that interested me the most based on the title was Extra Lives, Why Video Games Matter. I'm a gamer. I was born in the early 80s, so video games have always been an important part of my life, and I enjoy playing them. The article that didn't interest me as much based on the title was The Case for Single Child Families. Single child families aren't really a thing in my family, so I haven't had to worry about it or think about it that much. I have 3 children. My fiance has 5. My little brother has 6 children. So we have a large family with multiple children in them. So I didn't think that that article would really speak to me or interest me. So starting off with Tom Bissell's article, Extra Lives, Why Video Games Matter. From the title, I expected it to be a breakdown of gaming culture and why games are a viable pastime or hobby, and not just a waste of time. While Tom did touch on a few of those things, it wasn't as in-depth as I thought. To me, it became more of a in-depth look at a specific video game. The video game in the article that he used as an example was Fallout 3. It felt more like a breakdown of a specific video game to people who may have never played video games or were not familiar with that specific game, Fallout 3. He started the article very well, I thought, using the presidential election of President Barack Obama to describe how much time he had been putting into video games. He says on page 214, "Someday my children will ask me where I was and what I was doing when the United States elected its first black president." He goes on to say that I slipped the game into the tray of my Xbox 360. The first polls were due to close in America in 2 hours. 1 hour of Fallout 3, I told myself, maybe 2. Absolutely no more than 3. 7 hours later, blinking and dazed, I turned off my Xbox 360, checked in with CNN, and discovered that the acceptance speech had already been given. In those lines, I really saw how much that, as part of a video gaming generation, you want to be interested in world news and the important aspects of life and society. And I think he makes a good reference here to the election you know, a historic American event to playing a video game for 7 hours straight without, you know, taking a break. In a report by Jenny Levine, titled "The Gaming Generation," on page 18 she says, taken as a whole, both male and female, the gaming generation represents some 90 million people up to about the age of 35. Around that age, we start to see very definitive drop-off levels in game playing and of knowledge about video games. All we need to do is think about the impact the 77 million boomers had on society to realize that group that is 10 million stronger will surely be a similarly significant force. I think Levine makes a better point of how important the gaming generation is and video games are to society than we realize. The baby boomer generation had literally changed the way, you know, politics in America, healthcare, insurance is affected. So to think we have a generation that has been playing video games most of their lives since, you know, they were old enough to pick up a controller. And myself as an example, I'm 37 years old, so I'm right in there at that the gaming generation that Levine refers to, and you don't really think about it that much and the impact it could have on the world. And I think that's where Bissell could have went more in depth in, instead of just describing one game for several pages. But he does speak on why that game was so addictive to him and why he was so into it. He says on page 215, the pleasures of the open world game are ample, complicated, intensely private. Their potency is difficult to explain, sort of like religion, of which these games become, for many, an aspartame form. Because of the freedom they grant gamers, the narrative and mission-generating manner in which they reward exploration and their convincing illusion of endlessness, the best open-world games tend to become leisure time-eating viruses. So as you can see, even in this example, he starts off explaining why people can get so into a video game, but then refers to them as leisure time eating viruses. So I guess I felt torn through the whole article. Are you trying to tell me that video games can be good, or are you telling me that they're just a waste of time? He wraps up his article by saying, how is it finally that I keep returning to a form of entertainment that I find so uniquely frustrating? To what part of me do games speak, and on which frequency? So Bissell ends his article with an open question to the reader. I understand the point of leaving an open-ended article to continue the thought and conversation on that topic, but it wasn't really what I was expecting in the beginning. Moving on to McKitten's article on one-child families. I've already stated why I didn't think it'd be interesting to me. As we go on, I'll hopefully explain why it became very interesting to me and a topic I would like to do more research on. McKitten states on page 224, in one recent study, condoms broke 4.8% of the time that they were used. 60% of all pregnancies in the U.S. are unintended. 60%. That doesn't mean all those children are unwanted. Half just come when their parents weren't planning on it, but half end in an abortion. I think out of all the statements in his article, that was the most potent to me. Numbers that I don't look at a lot in my personal life. I don't look for those types of articles or information. It was really staggering to me that the numbers were that big. I think he does a very good job of giving a full rounded conversation of pros and cons, whereas the video game article was more one-sided, was more a subset group of a bigger culture discussion. McKibben really delved into socioeconomic discussions, religious reasons for having or not having one or more kids. Developmental, environmental, self-serving ideations. These are all areas that I had never really considered before when it came to myself having children. I wanted to have children. Me and my wife at the time had children. We knew we didn't want more than 3, but we knew we wanted more than 1. I don't think we put more thought into it than that. And I think maybe a lot of people, that can apply to a lot of people today. McKibben refers to research done on only child families that may state that the only child is more egotistical, maybe more behavioral. They may have more behavioral problems. In a report on single parent only child families that was based off a pilot study by Bayrakal, they state there's a great deal of literature on single parent families, but little delineation of specific subgroups. In this pilot study, 12 adolescent patients were an only child in single parent families were compared to a control group of adolescent patients matched for sex, family income, and diagnosis. The contradictory conclusions of the different studies on the only child are due in part to the limitations of research designs which failed to take into account every possible variable called confounding factors by Falbo in 1979. So even they say that a lot of these studies that are done on only child families may not be as accurate because there's a lot of variables that can come into play. McKibben says on page 227, so is there a different way to achieve some of that maturity with no children or only a single child to change your life? It's not that one kid won't alter most things in your life. He or she will. But Ryan was right. It's not the total commitment that comes with a large brood. Coming from someone that is raising a large brood, I could see that. It's a lot of commitment to raise many children. Doesn't mean you can't do it successfully. Doesn't mean having more than one child is irresponsible either. I feel like the title and the content of McKibben's essay went well together. He made me think about topics involving raising children that I hadn't considered before. I enjoyed it very much. Now, moving on to the second part of the discussion, I did secondary research through EBSCO. If you're unfamiliar, you can access EBSCO through library.jury.edu. Click on resources and then databases. And then you can scroll down and look for EBSCO host. On the next page, I select all and then continue. You do have to sign in with your jury login and password to access the database. For search criteria, I selected all resources and the keywords gaming culture. It returned 481 hits. I limited it to scholarly journals, and it returned 91 hits. After that, I limited it to academic search elite, and it came back with 23 hits. And I removed reviews because I wasn't interested in book reviews, which were a lot of the results that I was seeing, and it returned 20 hits. So out of 20 hits, I was able to find a valid reference on the topic of gaming culture. For the second article, I again used all resources and keyword single child families. It returned over 3,000 hits. I limited it to full text only and scholarly journals, and it returned 781. And then I limited it again to reports only, and it returned 64 hits. When researching, I wanted scholarly peer-reviewed articles that fit the topics I read about, and I needed full text to be able to read and access the entire document through my internet browser. If anyone has any more tips on how to thoroughly research a topic and get more return, better hits, please leave comments down below and I will look into those. And I thank you for your time, and please let me, leave any feedback for me. I'd be interested in what people have to say. And I will end this video off with a works cited page, so that will be coming up on the screen in a minute. I appreciate you for your time, and have a nice day.